Yeah, check Messenger. I'll send it to you. Welcome to Faith Unaltered. We got to roll, Travis.
I can just go without my camera.
Unaltered. Welcome, everybody, to another Faith Unaltered launch day event. I am your host, David Russell, and I am here with two exceptional gentlemen, Travis Worth of the RTB Apologetics community and the man of the hour, Caleb Jackson. What's up, Caleb?
I wish I was a doctor. Thank you, though.
We'd be making some good dough, huh?
Right, exactly.
Oh, man. So, Travis, what's going on, man?
Not much. Doing good. Just finishing up school. Been doing a lot of reading, stuff like that. Really looking forward to getting into this this issue of the problem of evil, theodicies, the defeat condition, things like that. I did have some slides I really wanted to share, but technology being what it is.
Don't worry, I'm gonna fix that for you. I'm gonna get you your stuff up there so you'll be able to at least see it. So I just let me work on that while you guys introduce yourself, introduce your topics, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So as David said, I'm Travis. I'm with the Reasons to Believe Apologetics community, and yeah, looking forward to this. And I think Caleb wanted to get us started. He's going to kind of lay some groundwork. And then I'm going to do more of the philosophical argument and going to do a Bayesian formulation. And so I will let Caleb start.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. So when we talk about theodicy, what we mean is a potential solution to the problem of evil. Now, what is the problem of evil? Well, the problem of evil is typically the formal term for a deduction that a lot of people have had. In fact, most Christians probably.
Caleb, you dropped out.
And that is the idea that there's a bit of a lag, so if it cuts off, it'll return back. Yeah. So the problem of evil basically is the idea that God is all powerful and all good, and yet there's still evil in the world. And so why is this? Is God unable to fix evil, in which case he would not be all powerful? Is God unwilling, in which case he would not be all good? And so that is the logical problem of evil that goes back to people like Epicurus, allegedly, and was formulated more contemporaneously. The second part would be the evidential problem of evil, which is more what Travis and I are going to be focusing on today, which is a probabilistic argument to say that, well, the logical problem of evil doesn't necessarily hold. It's logically possible that God could exist alongside evil, but nevertheless, it's very unlikely that such evil could happen, and that there's no plausible or probable method for God allowing such evils. And so this is propounded by people like William Rowe. And so that's the idea we're getting into. Now, usually when you hear different theodicies and defenses, a defense is only meant to go against. For the sake of this stream, we're not necessarily going to be spending a lot of time on like the free will defense, for example, which is pretty well known in the community and people who've looked at the subject. But we'll be looking at different ideas such as soul making and Felix Culpa and the defeat condition. So with that introduction, I will let Travis begin his slides.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to go without the slides.
All right, we'll go without the slides then.
But that's okay. So I think, it's really important that, first of all, we start out with the right axiology or value theory. The axiology I'm going to be using is that first and foremost, God is not a moral agent in the same way that humans are. In other words, he's not bound by our ethical guidelines. Secondly, I'm going to be using a defeat condition. Namely, God is morally permissible in bringing about bad states of affairs so long as they are defeasible. As Chisholm states in his essay on the defeat of good and evil, quote, "Evil is defeated when it is integrated as a constitutive part of a valuable composite whole that not only outweighs the evil, but could not be as valuable as it is without the evil. In that instance, the evil remains evil in its own right, but it is defeated since it is made to be a good-making, non-regrettable part of the whole," end quote. I think this is especially prominent in a canonical theism like Christianity. In the Christian account of Jesus' death and resurrection, The evil of Jesus's torturous death by crucifixion is not just outweighed by his subsequent resurrection, but it was defeated by it, since the crucifixion is integrated as an essential good-making part of a larger redemptive whole, which could not have the value it does without the crucifixion. Instead of the ordinary ethical necessity conditions that evils must somehow be balanced off, following Chisholm, John Schneider, and Trent Doherty, I propose that God's only moral obligation in authorizing evil is to meet the defeat condition. Now, the theodicy that I will put on offer is going to be the saint fostering theodicy, which arguably will put the existence of evils, including the amounts, frequency, and distribution, in favor of and even predicted over naturalism.
Travis, is this good for your slide here?
Yes. Okay. So is that on screen?
Yeah, that's on screen right now. Just showing you what they are.
Okay. Yeah. Go back to the first one.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So yeah, you'll see the categories 1 through 9. So I think a good place to start is exactly where we're at, and that's going to be the fine-tuning of virtues. Some of the highest virtues are things such as courage, compassion, kindness, generosity, benevolence, mercy, tolerance, honor, truthfulness, trustworthiness, responsibility, friendship, cooperation, diligence, discipline, helpfulness, gratitude, and especially empathy and forgiveness as being the greatest manifestations of agape love. The fundamental assumption is going to be how one responds in this life is more important than what happens to one, and that the best kind of life is the one exemplifying the highest virtues. So when asked what type of world it would be predicted for a perfect God to create, the answer is going to be one that will foster the highest amount of virtue building possible. The logical necessary preconditions for the display of the highest virtues of sufficient intensity, but should not be so intense as to destroy the psyche of most of those in the situation, and of the sufficient frequency to provide multiple opportunities to form habits, but not too frequent so as to yield too high a probability of complete demoralization of the souls who are going through them. There must be a sufficient chance of success for a significant number of individuals. This gives us a sort of testing measure of the fine-tuning of virtues. And only one of them will occupy the Goldilocks region with respect to the amount of risk in the world. So we're going to look at number 1. The amount of evils cannot be too frequent and too mild. It cannot be, as number 2 states, too frequent and the right intensity. It can't be too frequent and too intense. It can't have the right frequency and yet be too mild. You'll notice number 5, the right frequency and the right intensity. Then you'll notice number 6, the right frequency and too intense. Number 7 is too infrequent and too mild. Number 8 is going to be too infrequent and the right intensity. And number 9 is going to be too infrequent and too intense. And so the Saint Fostering Theodicy would propose that we find ourselves in a type 5 universe. This is a world producer of much opportunity for and considerable exercise of virtue, yet it is relatively rare that evils of a sufficient degree occur. This is because it has the setup with much considerable risk built in. Yet it is quite rare for people to lead lives which they consider on the whole not worth living. This fine-tuning virtues is much more to be expected given theism than naturalism. So the facts about the distribution and intensity of evil favor theism over naturalism, as naturalism leaves it to chance as to which kind of world there should be. Theism entails we should be in a type 5 universe, since it is the best possible kind of world for a perfect being to create. So the prior probability of a type 5 universe given theism is 1. And so we'll go to the next slide. So a central theme is the transformative power of triumph over tragedy and the formation of virtuous saintly character. Evil is defeated in sainthood. So in the Bayesian formulation of the argument from evil, assuming that the hypothesis of theism and naturalism are roughly on par with respect to prior probability, the issue comes down to the likelihood ratio of the two hypotheses with respect to the facts pertaining to evil. So let S be the theoretical story about God wanting to bring about a world that offers ample opportunity for the development of the highest virtues, which requires significant risk of significant abuse of morally sufficient agency. Let T and N represent theism and naturalism. Let EH be the relevant data regarding suffering. Namely, ever since its existence, there has been an abundance of intense suffering. That is, wherever there has been life, very significant levels of suffering have been quite common. Now, look at EH through the lens of God's plan. Having considered what kind of values can be expected in a God-created universe, and consequently what kinds of actions he is likely to take, we can re-describe the facts of EH as follows. EH, since very near the beginning of existence, suffering has come about with a frequency and intensity which falls into a relatively narrow band with enough magnitude to foster saints, but not so high as to widely overwhelm and make the struggle futile. This data places our world in a certain class of worlds. One theism says must exist if God creates. It also describes evils of worlds which is it's permissible for God to create, so far as we know, since there is no evidence of any indefeasible evil. So, given that the probability of EH given TS being very high, indeed 1, let K be the class of best possible worlds. Every world K in K is a world with a significant number of opportunities for sainthood and not an insignificant number of saints. All saints display some of the highest virtues. All opportunities for sainthood involve very significant trials. Thus, every world K is a world in which there are significant trials. Let K be the proposition that the actual world is a member of K. Let S be the saint-seeking story according to which, in creating humans, God sought saints and all that entails. So, if we want to go to the next one. The probability of EH given T and S is exactly equal to 1, whereas the probability of EH given naturalism is quite low. And so with that, I will close it out right there.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right, Caleb, you were breaking up, buddy.
Yeah. As we said before, it's going to lag a little bit. So just hold on when it does. It should catch back up. Go ahead. What you were saying.
Yeah. And I was going to clarify if I need to, if that was too technical. Basically, it's saying that, there's a certain class of worlds that God would be predicted to create. And it has to have the just right frequency of the ability to build virtues. So obviously it can't be too intense that it overwhelms everyone, but it can't be so mild as that virtue isn't built. And so God has created a world in which fosters saints, of which I would also include the animals as being given martyrdom status, that they play an integral role. And I believe in the eschaton, they will be deified as martyrs, and so that their evils will be defeated. And so the basic idea is that God, while being a moral agent, is not a human moral agent who is under our ethical guidelines, and he's more concerned about what we become than necessarily what we go through. And so we would expect a world precisely as this that fosters the ability to build saints.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And so I guess the idea is that the saint making process is meant to develop us morally, right? And that we can have trials to overcome. So we have diseases so that we can have people become doctors and missionaries and go overseas and help people. Same with natural disasters and so forth. And so I think you and I, particular people in particular situations, to enact these. Like he's not sitting up there like, okay, today I'm going to give him this list and this and this. He's just putting in the boundaries to prevent people from getting gratuitous evil. But
Right.
he may not himself like cause a tsunami or cause someone to get cancer. Maybe he allows the natural laws to work their ways where that could happen, or where potentially other agents such as demons could do that. But the point is, God allows it so that these are defeasible evils. And I believe the Bible even says that God will not
I think you're breaking
allow
up a little
applied
bit.
here, that evil can be overcome, whether in this life or the next. So
Right.
I think this model does require that there is some kind of post-mortem chances of soul making as well. in the
Exactly.
afterlife, before the resurrection.
Exactly. And so, and this is also going to be a lot of it's going to be tied into something like Richard Swinburne would say with regards to natural evil, that you need these certain regular laws and processes occurring in regular ways to be able to form justified true belief and have epistemic knowledge of the world around you, and to know the consequence of moral decisions. So you need this type of environment for that to happen. And another thing is that, like you were saying, given the hypothesis of theism, eternal life, the afterlife, is an entailment. So it's really important that we make clear it's not an auxiliary hypothesis. It's entailed with the hypothesis of theism. And that, so let's say there are some individuals who succumb to evils in this world, who at the end of this life, they may think their life is no longer worth living. So you can think of tragic stories of suicide, Holocaust members, and things of that nature. But given theism, their soul building and their development continues on until it reaches, sainthood. And so, and so with this, all evil, at least any evil that I can even think of, is defeasible, given the hypothesis of theism. And so, not only would evils not count against that, because we're not doing a necessity condition where every evil that occurs must be balanced off with a greater good and everything. This is more of along the lines of the defeat condition. And again, God is morally permissible in permitting evils that are defeasible.
Right. And I think a lot of people, when they postulate this is done almost like it's a defense of like, this is a possibility that we can observe. And I think that's true. But I would also argue that we have pretty good empirical evidence to do this as well. This isn't just it is a theory, but it's a theory that's backed by empiricism called the soul-making theodicy and evidentiary approach.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that looks at different data samples that shows that this is not just anecdotally, but there are studies that show that, for example, torture victims are more likely to become more spiritual. That includes rape victims, victims of child abuse, families who, and various tragic stuff, but families who've suffered loss of children report being closer to God afterwards. And of course, I think soul making is be soul made in the afterlife. But I tend to think that the suffering of young children is meant for the parents and for them to grow in that sense. So that's an important value point. And as we said with post-mortem soul making, I would also point to NDEs, near-death experiences, which I think we have good evidence to think that some of them are legitimate and not just hallucinations based on people being able to give back verifiable information. But in the consensus among these is that people who come back are almost always words in that sense. And so with these with those as data points, if those are legitimate experiences of the afterlife, that gives us very good empirical grounds for supposing that there is this sense of post-mortem soul making in the afterlife. And so I think all of this accumulates together. And so I would just end it by saying that under theism, I don't think we can necessarily predict that there wouldn't be suffering. And I think that given that suffering is shown to be able to make us better people, that is actually predicted under theism. Whereas I think naturalism, if there was suffering, would go, we'd have to have some kind of coping process to survive. But if I think in a world, you'd have to have a world in which there was no potential for moral development, in which people had amnesia every 5 minutes and always forgot, or in a world in which there was no afterlife. That would be pretty good evidence against theism. But I think without that, then the predictions line up better with theism.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of like we were mentioning yesterday, the contingency of physical reality as to why there should be anything at all. The fact that the cosmos and local conditions are so fine-tuned to bring about this biological process that embodied moral agents should develop, and everything is going to be much more expected under theism, whereas under naturalism, it would be quite surprising that we would naturally develop sentient creatures who even have the ability to suffer in the first place. Whereas under theism, given the saint-making theodicy, we would expect not just the suffering, but the amount, frequency, and distributions that we have. And what I think is also really interesting is when we use the defeat condition, unless it can be shown that there are evils that are simply indefeasible, I don't see the problem of evil going through. So it would kind of seem balanced between naturalism and theism. Then when I think we add a theodicy, that this would be fine-tuned and predicted under theism, then I think the evidence is tipped in favor of theism over naturalism.
Right, exactly. And so I think when it comes to, in trying to intermingle this, I think we can necessarily, act as if God is completely hands-off and never interacts, right? I think God does on rare occasions perform miracles. I think
Yes.
God is there to cope with people. I think God does answer prayers sometimes, but I don't think we're in the position to say individual cases. So I think we can do this as a narrative structure as a whole and say this is God's overall plan, but I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable telling a Holocaust survivor, for example, oh yes, well, God put you through that for this reason. I don't think we can make those judgments.
No, and when it comes to emotional suffering, so we're
or maybe it's both. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bit of a lag here. But yeah. So when it comes to the emotional problem of evil, so we're dealing with that God would permit defeasible evils, but I think even a canonical theism like Christianity is going to have the highest value in the emotional aspect of evil, because what are we called to do? We're called to forgive those who wrong us. We're called to rejoice with those who rejoice, to mourn with those who mourn, to feed the hungry, to be there for the widows and orphans, and everything, and to just be there. And so, I think a canonical theism like Christianity comes out ahead on the emotional problem and the evidential problem.
Yeah, and would you say, and so it's not just that the trials are there to give us things to interact with, but we're supposed to overcome them, right? Because I have heard people give I don't know if you've heard the term, the bystander objection, to say, well, if all evil works out for good, then should.
Caleb, can you repeat that? You broke
evil.
up.
Right.
I
know it broke up.
Yeah.
I know there's a lag, though. That's why I usually stop talking. There's a lag, but the point is, like, someone says, "Oh, let's say a baby is drowning. Well, should I stop and not do anything because this is going to lead to the baby's soul?
Right.
Or should I intervene?" And so I don't. And Paul says, should we continue sinning? No. So it's not the idea that all evil leads to good. So if I intervene, I'm preventing a greater good. It could be that the good is me saving the baby, and that's meant for me. So yeah.
And so you bring up a really good point, because that is a common objection, and that's what's so interesting about this is we're not going off a greater good theodicy, we're going off a defeat condition. And so with the example, like, should I not prevent an evil because it would lead to to good and moral development? But you'll remember this is under the hypothesis that God is, while he might be a moral agent, he's not a human moral agent under our ethical guidelines. So we are ethically bound to intervene, whereas God is more ethically bound in our character development overall throughout all eternity. And so it would be a different category. Whereas we do have an ethical guideline, and God is moral, but he's not bound by our ethical guidelines.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the problem of evil actually ties in pretty nicely, or at least with this narrative structure, with divine hiddenness as well, because I think for us to develop morally, We need that kind of space, that ability to do this of our own fruition. I can't say the word without God being like obviously overseeing us, like it's North Korea or 1984, where he's just, I know it cut off there, but so I think that we need that epistemic distance. And so I think if God was more obvious, people would be more willing to blame him. I mean, people still do even today, but
Sure.
I think it'd be even worse emotionally for people to have to be abused and then just see God like standing in the corner or something, and doing that. So I think God has good reasons to be hidden for those reasons, because of theodicy reasons as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is timing too, because I grew up not believing in God myself, but then I have come to not just believe in him, but experience him. And so it could very well be the case that there are times when it's best for God to remain at an epistemic distance for certain processes, reasons, and then to later reveal himself. And as far as non-resistant non-believers, I'm not exactly sure how reasonable we are. I mean, because we are emotional creatures, but I think God can be, especially with given natural theology. I think God is abundant if one searches for him. So.
Yeah, seek and ye shall find in that example. I would also bring up, I think we have a little bit of time before we wrap up, but the Felix Culpa Theodicy as well, which ties into this, I think. And that basically says, Felix Culpa is Latin for the fortunate fall. And that implies that the fall was in fact a good thing, and that God could have, made a world in which no one sinned, but that actually would have drawbacks to it. So if we think of love and relationship, that tier has different levels. So, you can love a particular food, you can love your dog, and then you can love a friend, and you can love someone in your family. And there's different levels. You might love an acquaintance, but there's a certain level where you're willing to die for someone or sacrifice everything for someone. So in a world in which this was like a sinless Eden-like state, we would love God and have a relationship with him, but we wouldn't really understand it in that sense. It would be a lower level one because God would never really have to sacrifice anything, and we wouldn't have to endure hardships. So we wouldn't really understand the good of overcoming those. And so in a world in which God has to become incarnate and atone for sin and die for us and endure eternal suffering on the cross for us, that shows us that a greater sense of love that we wouldn't have otherwise known. And so it's better that God do that and have a world in which that can happen than it is for God to have a world in which there is no sin, but our relationship with him is more strained. So we have that eternal perspective of God in that new light now. So I think that's not, like I give the example of the prodigal son, where he's with his dad and then he leaves and he right. And of course, when he comes back to his father's still the same. Nothing's really changed, but he now has a new understanding of his dad. And so now he realizes how much he loves his dad because of all the bad stuff he did, because of how much that didn't make him happy in comparison. So I think it's that hindsight that we need in our own sin to appreciate God, and that we wouldn't have appreciated him otherwise. So that, I think, is the strength of that particular theodicy with the defeat condition that you were discussing.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think they tie in very nicely together. And it's, I think about it just on a personal level. I think, let's say 10 billion trillion years from now, I think us, the animals, will look back on our the integral role we played in the overall redemptive story, and we will be thankful for the parts that we played in it, and that through Christ, through his resurrection, our evils were defeated, and everything. And there is one other thing that I did want to touch on that's not so much related to the defeat condition, but a lot of these natural evils of, let's say, hurricanes, tornadoes, things of that nature, animal predation, there is a bit of fine tuning. For example, with the carnivores will go after usually the sick and dying of the herbivores. And so you actually need this intricate balance for functioning ecosystems. You have things like hurricanes that are disastrous, but they also help regulate precipitation. And so, there is a bit of fine tuning, to all these even natural disasters, which in turn goes into this moral agency and moral character development. So I think that can be added into the defeat condition as well. That given something like a defeat condition, the fine tuning of these certain natural disasters wouldn't be very surprising.
Right. Yeah. And of course, if these animals are intelligent and have capabilities like that, they can share in that. So yeah, I think what you're saying is correct. I don't know if David's still there. Are you still there, David? When 2 out of 3 of us have our cameras
Yeah,
off,
I'm
it's
here.
hard to tell. Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm here.
Did we have any super chats or any comments?
I
or
was
anything
just
like that?
letting you guys do your thing. No, nothing yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we've summarized that pretty well, but I didn't know if you had any like comments or questions or things you didn't need to clarify with.
Yeah, what do you guys think of, let's say, let me bring out some notes here that I was taking. What do you guys think about like suffering overall? I mean, is suffering an evil thing? And I mean, is that part of the why do we associate that with the problem of evil when it could just be some sort of boundary condition? And I think reality has to have a consequent to it, right? So so I want to preface that. Is there I'll preface it in a minute, but I'll let you respond to that first part first.
Well, I would just say that, there is, and this will kind of get into fine tuning. There is some amount that's needed because, it's only by getting burned that we learn to stay away from fires. It's, adrenaline that we learn to avoid danger. And so there is a fine tuning. It's kind of, this will go back to Richard Swinburne's, idea that we need regular laws and processes occurring in regular ways, and to suffer to learn to avoid harm and things of that nature. Although the problem of evil may say that the amount that we do suffer is more than is necessary.
So Travis, would you include that fine tuning as like part of a response to Draper's pain and pleasure argument?
As far as Draper's pain and pleasure argument, I honestly think Trent Doherty's animal theodicy, for them being included in sainthood and being deified in martyrdom, I think completely puts Draper's argument to bed, to be honest. They've had several dialogues, and a lot of Trent Doherty's thesis was in response to Draper. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Now there is a fine tuning to it, but somebody like Draper would say, well, they don't have to suffer this much. Why did God have to do it this way? And I think that's where Doherty's thesis really comes in.
Yeah, okay. I would also say there are differing opinions on that. I think Michael Murray, for example, thinks that animals don't suffer.
Yeah, I'm not sure because in Trent's book, he lists some scientific discoveries and everything. I think that they do. I mean, there's certainly.
I think William Lane Craig says that as well too.
Yeah, Craig does proponent. He talks about the cortex not being fully developed to be able to comprehend.
Well, if I wanted to be, you could give an ad hoc one and say even if it's psychologically true that the soul is different, so that there's an aspect of the soul that animals don't have that disallows them from suffering in that way, which is ad hoc because there's no like that.
You cut out there again, Caleb.
I can't really disprove it, but
yeah. I'm a little skeptical of that thesis that animals don't suffer, and I wouldn't want to use that, especially as being a dog lover myself. If I see my dog suffer, I'm not. Well, he's not self-conscious, so he's not aware that I, the dog, am in pain. I'm like, no.
Yeah, but don't you have like a comfort though, knowing that maybe he's not comprehending it like we are? Now he's reacting, I think, because I think that's also part of a boundaries like condition. I mean, if something's going wrong with it, it's going to react, right? I mean, that's part of its instinct, right? So, but I'm not sure it can comprehend that rationale like us. You know what I mean? Like it's not
Right.
like it doesn't know. In other words,
Yeah.
it doesn't know that it's suffering. It's reacting to a level of pain that is required, I guess. That
But the
would be
atheist would
affected,
probably
right?
still say that pain is bad, though, right? Like even
And that's the
people,
thing is like, and that's the thing is pain bad? I mean, is it
pain is
something evil?
unnecessary.
And that's the thing. Is it unnecessary? And is it a result of not only the result of a consequent, right? It's a result of a boundary condition that makes up reality, right? I don't think if someone shot a gun, if it turned into a pillow before it hit you, I think that would be something as humans we would try to wake up from. We'd be like, oh, this is a dream, right? I don't think humans would be able to comprehend that as reality. So I think it's a consequent of this reality. So
Right.
yeah, that's kind of like how I'm looking at it in a way.
Well,
What do you guys think?
I don't think we would even. I think we wouldn't have moral responsibility if we knew that guns always shot pillows. Then we would find other ways to kill people. It's like if we do a high five versus me smacking you in the face, right? I know that there's going to be a difference between that. And so that's where you get the laws of physics. Where I can't be blamed if every time we did a high five, something could happen where you could burst into flames, you could fly. I couldn't really be responsible for what happens to you because it's a.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be. Yeah, and that's the thing is like what I'm trying to I guess what I'm trying to say is that we would find another way to kill somebody on that aspect. I would say, well, then that would be evil still, and then whatever way we tried to find to kill somebody, that evil would be gone. It would turn into like
but there would still be a regularity though. If there was a new way to kill someone, that would have to have some kind of law or regularity. Otherwise, you could never efficiently kill someone because you never know what the result would be.
Exactly, and that's the thing. This reality has boundaries and it has consequences to things you do, and I don't think it would be reality if it didn't have those. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, when it comes back to the idea, is pain bad? I don't think pain necessarily is bad. I guess that
depends on the context. If God just created a world in which we suffered pain for no moral good and no end goal, that I think that would be bad.
Yeah, not necessarily. Hold on, Travis. Not necessarily, right? I mean, like if I stub my toe, right, on the side of the bed, that's just my toe reacting to the matter that. And it just hurts because I'm violating the boundary of that reality. I don't mean to do it, and it's not building my soul up. Matter of fact, it might bring me down a little bit.
That's the evil God doing it for you,
right?
What's the environment though? It's just the potential for that, right?
But yeah, and I totally agree with the idea of potential and stuff like that. What I'm trying to say is that like, I just see that there could be also a reason, and that reason could be boundaries, like consequences, a world that would have some sort of boundary that would constitute reality. You know what I mean?
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think we are.
We're saying the same thing, and you're just using different terminology.
Could be. So is there a such thing to you guys as gratuitous suffering?
Yes.
You'd have to define. I mean, like on an individual level, I don't think as a scope there. Like, I don't think it's I don't think it's undefeatable, but it might be gratuitous for an individual. I mean, I can.
What do you mean by that, David? Let me ask that.
Well, I wanted Caleb to explain what he means by gratuitous evil. You got here late. You don't get to ask questions.
I did. That's why I'm asking questions.
What means by gratuitous evil?
Catch me up, guys.
I guess I'll go ahead and start until Caleb gets back.
I'm back, but go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead. I thought you were having a lag.
I didn't know what I forgot the question was. Just go ahead.
Okay. So with the issue of gratuitous evil, like that's in other words, I think there are some evils that aren't exactly counterbalanced off. I think there are some instances in this life where it's pure loss. Yes, I think things like the Holocaust. There's been several tragedies that I think are pure evil, and and everything. And so my thesis would be not that for every evil, a good must be counterbalanced off, because I don't think that's the type of world God would create. I think God would, again, he's more concerned about what we become than what happens to us. That, you know, that while he may be moral, he's not bound by our ethical guidelines, and that he's more concerned about bringing about defeasible evils.
Travis, can I ask a clarifying question real quick?
Sure.
So let's change the terminology a little bit. Do you believe that there's purposeless evil?
Purposeless evil? No, I think so. Here's the thing, and this might help clarify it. I think God has created a world where, and I don't know if you were listening earlier, where the highest amount of virtues can be built.
Okay.
And so, like, it's only in a world where, you know, there's danger and threat that we can develop courage. It's only in a world where bad states of affairs obtain that we can learn, you know, forgiveness and things like that. So what I think God has created a world that has risk in it that can be significantly abused. But it's overall, it's the best possible world to develop these virtuous character. But
yeah, and I think the reason Tyler asked that, and that was a great follow-up, is that a lot of people equate gratuitous evil to purposeless evil. So it might be something that we need to be mindful of when we're witnessing about the problem of evil, that we're able to make that demarcation, because it's like a lot of people do. And I was just before Tyler asked that, I always have equated gratuitous with purposelessness, you know?
So yeah, I equate it with it not being balanced out by a greater good. So like, let's say a spider crawls on my shoulder, I squash it. Okay, so I kill the spider and I get a skin infection. There's no greater good that comes out of that. I think there are those type of instances.
Well, the doctor.
Well, yeah. There you go. Okay.
Maybe the doctor paid. You get you know, he got to feed his family because you got a skin infection, man.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked that, Travis, because I'm thinking you brought up the Holocaust, and I'm thinking about people that actually survived the Holocaust. I don't know if I feel comfortable about saying, well, nothing good came out of that. You know,
no. That's not what I'm saying. No.
Okay.
No. So let me clarify.
Forgive me.
No, in fact, in Trent Doherty's book, there have been Holocaust survivors who have overcome that and have developed tremendous forgiveness, love, and there's several books. But there are some who did succumb to the misery.
Sure.
And I don't know if you were listening earlier, but I believe that God, because eternal life is under the proposition of theism, and that these people who succumb in this life continue on to soul build in eternity. And that what you said would kind of go into the point of like virtue building, that there are Holocaust survivors who have gone on to lead tremendous lives and being an inspiration. So yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right on, Caleb.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Travis has said. It really just depends, but I do think there are certainly I think there are certainly horrendous evils. I'm big into true crime, so I mean I can think of a lot of examples.
True crime.
I think what Caleb just said is a better terminology, because gratuitous. Gratuitous. It kind of gets murky. Horrendous evils, like really horrible evils.
And I don't think we could understand the depravity and the evil of sin if horrendous evils didn't take place. I mean, it wouldn't be a big deal. You know what I mean? So maybe sin does cause horrendous evil.
I think gratuitous is a good word, though, because I think when I think of that, I mean there are elements that are that seem unnecessary. Like if there was a good, it could be accomplished with lesser. Like I don't know, just look up like Junko Futura or something, Japanese girl who was like tortured for 40 days and raped over 100 times. Like if that had been cut, I mean, it just depends. Like, you know, could God have cut back a little bit on that and eased the suffering earlier and would have gotten the same result? So that's kind of what I mean by gratuitous. Like if someone stabbed 100 times, if they had been stabbed 59 times and still had died from it, like would that have been any better? Or not. So I guess that's what it seems.
Yeah. My thing is I think that, no, I don't think and that's where I do think the free will defense does come in pretty strong, is that, you have these free moral agents that are committing this horrendous evil, and it's just, that's the depravity of sin. That's what sin does. Sin corrupts everything. Back in ancient history, down towards Augustine's time, they thought sin was like a loss of form. They thought you were like, that you weren't, what you were anymore. It's a loss of form. It's a loss of that part of your humanity. It contorts you and stuff like that. So I think that, like, sin is a huge factor that I think, as philosophers and theologians, we don't bring into the equation with enough force of power.
Yeah, and kind of like what Caleb was saying with these horrendous evils. That's why I don't think greater good theodicies tend to work, because how does that greater good come about from something like that? I mean, there are goods that can come about through that, but is it in this life? I don't think there's a good that will sufficiently compensate for that. So I think that's where the defeat condition comes in, that given eternal life, that these individuals soul build and develop throughout all eternity.
Can I just ask this real quick, Travis? Could it be that our perspective from where we are, right, given the fact that we can't see and we don't know all of the different possibilities and all the different really actualities that come from any, just pick one, right, any evil that has happened, right? Could it be that our limited perspective limits us in that way, to where we can't know some things, whether good or evil, or whether good comes out of a particular evil situation? Does that make sense?
It does. That's kind of like skeptical theism.
Okay.
And an example that's often used is what's known as the butterfly effect. I don't know if you've heard of this, but like one butterfly, it can like affect like globally. The actions of one butterfly, can have global effects that we wouldn't necessarily be aware of. I do have some issues with using that as of course, I think that, because I think God is transcendent of our four-dimensional reality. So I think there is some aspect of that, yes. But the problem with doing things like that is I think God has given us, I think objective moral values and duties are best explained as coming from God. And it's, if God is that transcendent where we can't know, it's what can we know about him? So I think that that's open to kind of some lines of attack if we want to just go that route.
Yeah, Tyler, because someone could just say that God faked Jesus raised from the dead for a greater good that we can't understand, or that anything could be for a greater good. Maybe if I hear voices saying God told me to shoot up a school, well, that goes against my tuition, but maybe God has a greater purpose and I shouldn't question it. Like, that just opens up a whole kind of can of worms you don't want to go down.
Yeah.
And
so I think there
is that element of truth to it too, though. And that's why, like, I think what Travis was saying, it can't be ignored, but it can't be expounded upon. So I really hear what he's saying there when it comes to that. So yeah, I agree too on that aspect.
Gotcha.
But that's not to say that there's purposeless evil and stuff like that. That I think that we come together on quite firmly. But terminology's terminology, I guess. People use different terms to describe different things, man. But yeah, I think there's a lot to it. The issue of the problem of evil is multi-layered. I don't think you can do a greater good theodicy alone. Just like the free will defense doesn't stand by itself. Just like I think
cumulative.
Well, yeah, I think there's several factors. Just like the atonement, I think there's several layers to that onion. You know what I mean? There's so
we were talking about that the other day. Yeah.
Before I really got into like John Schneider, Trent Doherty, and everything. At first, my first conclusion was that kind of like Jonathan McLatchy was saying, last night, that given the evidence of natural theology and what I think goes through, like the contingency, the kalam, the fine tuning, the abductive moral argument, the historicity of the resurrection, things of that nature. I think even if there is like some evidence against theism from naturalism, that nevertheless the scale is tipped in favor of theism. Then I kind of got into more of the Thomist tradition that so someone like Brian Davies would say that God is not a moral agent. There is not a standard, but he is the good. There is not a standard that he's subjected to. And so God simply he desires the good. He creates for the good, and what we call evil is just a privation of that good, and he only permits that for an overall good, and he's not a moral agent who's under obligation to intervene in every instance of evil. But after kind of going through Trent's book and some other books, I've kind of shifted my view to more of a defeat condition, where I think there are some moral guidelines God goes by, but they're just not our human ethical guidelines.
Yeah, I do like the Thomistic approach. There's a lot of value in it, and that's why you won't see me claim like one particular position on it, because I think it's multi-layered, and I think it, if we are able to harmonize instead of just trying to okay, I'm going to go this route, but instead let's take a little bit of this route, a little bit of that route, a little bit of that route, and see what it looks like together. Maybe we could come up with a whole different approach that, these philosophers haven't been able to figure out yet.
Kind of like taking elements of truth from one argument, taking elements of truth from another argument.
But then again, I don't think
a good argument more.
I don't think the problem of evil could exist without theology. I just don't.
Yeah, and that kind of, it's like, what I've found the most convincing is, Trent Doherty's, saint fostering theodicy that, God creates a world where the highest amount of virtues can be built. And so that does require a significant amount of suffering. And that's exactly under the defeat condition. That's what God would be predicted to create. And not only that, but the animals. So you think of hundreds of millions of years of animal suffering, they're sort of given martyrdom status where they get to participate in this and participate in the afterlife as namely as being honored as martyrs. There's some kind of disagreement between Schneider and Doherty on exactly how that plays out. But yeah, I do think animals will be in the afterlife.
Yeah. Jeez, come back on that white horse, bro.
Right on, Caleb.
Let me go ahead, Caleb.
Oh no, I just was gonna say I agree with everyone that's cumulative, so that's all I had to say.
Right.
And I like dogs as well.
We all agree on something. Let me ask you this, guys. And no, Travis, to answer your question, I did not catch the earlier portion of this episode. I was actually doing a live Q&A on TikTok, something David was supposed to do, but he didn't do it. So,
I did
had to pick up the slack on that one.
Hey, I had technical issues.
I would use that excuse too if I didn't want to do something. But anyway, I was just playing, brother. Let me ask you guys this real quick, and forgive me if you've already addressed this, but is this really like you were talking about, Travis, just a second ago, that you've kind of shaped and molded your answer to theodicy, based on this one particular model? Are there different models that one can use, kind of like the existence of God? You got the Kalam, you've got all these different things, different types of arguments. Are there different types of arguments for theodicy? And if so, what is your favorite one?
Okay, so to kind of go back to the beginning, a lot of times, when it comes to the problem of evil, there's what's known as an axiology. It's a value system. In other words, what type of world should God create? What should God be permissible in allowing? And so many times the naturalist would just sort of presume the axiology for the theist. And no, it's the theist who presumes the axiology of their model. And the axiology I would go with is what's known as the defeat condition, that God, while being moral, is not, a human moral agent, and he's morally permissible in allowing evils so long as they're defeasible. And so right there, that evens out, that evens it out, where the problem of evil favors neither theism nor naturalism. It's neutral.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to object to using a defeat condition, then we would have a separate conversation about what God should be permitted to allow. But you'll notice that's no longer the problem of evil. That's a whole other discussion.
Right.
Okay. And so this evens it out. Okay. And then when I mentioned the saint fostering environment, that God would create a world where, you know, the highest amount of virtues between both human moral agents and future animals are able to develop would be predicted under theism. That's going to tip it in favor of theism, where it's actually evidence for theism, because it's, and I was giving a Bayesian argument that, you know, the probability of this amount of suffering given theism and the saint fostering environment and what God would be likely to create is 1. In other words, 100%. Whereas under naturalism, there's any type of world. Yeah, I mean, there's it makes no predictions about the amount, frequency, and distribution of evils. Whereas, you know, this would. And so I like this because not only does it even it out, but it tips it in favor of theism.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Caleb, how would you answer that question?
And I know Travis is going first on this, but I think I agree with him as far as the defeat, which is great. I mean, that's why we're together.
You're next.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot how long we're going on this, by the way. But yeah, the defeat condition is important. And I think that as long as there is an afterlife and potential for spiritual growth inside afterlife, that.
Yeah. Gotcha. David?
So.
Yeah, I think that's. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and it leaves the topic again still open for discussion, because I think the problem of evil, you know, we've got so much that could be discussed here. We could actually probably spend another 2 hours on discussing all the intricacies of it, but I think these guys did a great job putting a presentation
philosophers
together.
have debated it for, you know, centuries or millennia,
right?
Yeah,
right.
And I think it's really important to realize also that, in fact, Caleb and I talked on the phone for almost like an hour this morning about this, and we are in no sense downplaying the problem of evil. I think it's it's a powerful objection. I think it's one of the best objections.
Yeah.
I just find
I never thought it was a good objection. I just never did. I know. Y'all think I'm crazy, but I just never found it an actual good objection, because I think that the answer lies within the theological bounds. And once you cross that, you're in my territory at that point. So, you know what I mean? So, I mean, you could say that, you know, you could philosophize, but I just don't think that it's, well, it's an objection, obviously. And I think it's something that has to be addressed, but I don't think it's a good objection unless you're granting God to begin with. So,
you're talking about like on a practical level.
Well, Travis and I are just saying that we agree that the probability of people being able to suffer is very high under theism, but we don't think that necessarily means that there's objective evil. I mean, you could just hypothesize indifference and just switch out the term evil, right? So
yeah,
to be careful with that.
Yeah, and in fact, we could sick Ben Watkins after you.
Yeah, but you know, but at that point, I mean, indifference is just indifference, right?
Well, no, because
if there's no God, right? I mean,
it's an internal critique, though. It's saying if there was a God, you shouldn't expect and he values people, you shouldn't expect these levels of suffering. Whereas if the universe is indifferent,
why not?
It wouldn't care anyway.
Why not? We sinned. We rebelled against
God. That's what we're asking. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this.
That's why I don't think it's a good objection. We've already had the answer in Genesis chapter 3. You know, I mean,
I think I'll just.
Apart,
I think I'll just agree to disagree on that with you, David.
It's not a close shot thing.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
when you have
sin
billions of years of suffering,
is the whole thing, man. The sin has corrupted everything.
But when you have sin but you have death before the fall and all this other
why
stuff,
would death be a bad thing? What's wrong with that? The type of death that you're equating involves suffering. What if there was that idea of suffering wasn't here before the fall, and it was just like a snake shedding skin, like, you know, God set it up to where, I mean, look at mankind. When they die, when he said, you'll surely die after you eat this fruit, that he didn't die physically. So death is obvious. There's something more to death than just physical death. And what if, like, this boundary that we have, like, if we were to get mortally wounded in pre-fall conditions, what if it would just be like the shedding of skin or something? It would, who knows? Who knows what it was like before the fall?
Dinosaurs had these well, we know what the conditions were like as far as like the laws of nature could go. I mean, we can show that. I'm just confused with what you're saying. I mean, I can show you that a T-Rex cause it to die.
Yeah, but what if that was there was something more to it than that pre-fall, right? What if there's something more to it that we just haven't found yet? I'm not saying I have the answer here. Like I said, like I don't. I think there's definitely something that the Earth was definitely different pre-fall. Okay, there's definitely stuff. Things were different. Humanity
that's the thing they're asking you, though,
right?
That's just what.
Could humanity live forever in the garden eating from the tree of life? Then obviously something was different. There were things that were different.
Well, I mean, the garden was localized. In fact, I think it was in the ancient Persian Gulf oasis. Robert Rowe of Sentinel Apologetics has some really cool stuff on this. Yeah. But
so hold on. Let me just ask this because you said it was centralized. Okay, we'd have to break this down a little bit, right? So when you say that, are you saying God was actively committing suffering and stuff like that outside of the garden? Like he was orchestrating, authoring suffering and evil outside of the garden, but not within the garden?
I think the laws of nature were exactly as they have been.
Agreed.
Throughout the last okay, so let's say life around 4.1 to 3.8 billion years. Yes, I think everything is the same. I think there is a Garden of Eden that God set up as his temple in the ancient Persian Gulf oasis around 13 to 70,000 years ago, somewhere in that period. And I think within that garden space, there was no death, there was no suffering, there was perfect harmony with God. And Adam and Eve blew that, and all of humanity fell as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. So what was God actually in charge of the evil that was going on outside of the garden? Was he the author in that? Was he authoring evil before, outside of the garden? I guess that's my question.
He just was not intervening. He was letting nature take its course and just stepping back.
So I'm kind of confused.
So here's the thing: like I think death becomes evil when the soul and the whole being is in jeopardy. I think there's just more to it. And I haven't figured it out yet. I haven't fully developed it yet. But that's part of this theodicy that I am actually on my theodicy I am actually working on. Like, was there something pre-fall that the death that we know it, maybe it had a different name. Maybe there's just more to it, because when Adam ate the fruit, and he sinned, he didn't die. You know what I mean? He didn't physically die, even though God said, the day you eat of it, you will surely die. You know what I mean? So there is something more to that. And I think that's where it comes into play. Was it just a transition from one state to the next, and that and that's what is some I don't know.
You just don't see that in the fossil record. You'd have to find. I mean, we could postulate, but you have to find.
I don't need it. I don't need it. What if heaven and earth were combined? I wouldn't say totally combined, but obviously.
But David, your view's not falsifiable now.
What's that?
The atheist is just going to say that you're speculating, whereas
exactly, but they're speculating too, right?
Well, no, but they're saying the best evidence we have implies that there was like this kind of death, and so you're adding on to this hypothesis to say, well, yes, but there was also this other stuff. They're just saying the simpler hypothesis to say that there's always been a suffering, and so that's what they're just saying that you're adding on auxiliary hypotheses that we don't know.
Yeah. So David, if I could just propose my understanding of it, is that you'll notice Adam and Eve were expunged from the garden. In fact, they were prevented from coming back. And so what were they expunged to? The outside chaotic world. I mean,
the wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but
interesting discussion.
Yeah. I don't know how
Yeah,
on
yeah.
topic that was, but yeah.
No, it was
Yeah.
way off a rabbit trail. That's why I did it. Because I do speculate on that stuff. Like, how do you resolve the fact of an all good God authoring evil outside of the garden? You know what I mean? So, was death? Is there more to death? Was there more to death than what we think of it right now?
Well, see, let me interrupt you, David, because under the Saint fostering theodicy, those evils were defeated, because we're going to talk about hundreds of millions of years of animal death and suffering. I mean, think of the Jurassic and the Triassic periods, all of that. These animals are going to be given a chance to soul build in the afterlife, and they give their lives. They're martyrs in the grand scheme of the overall creation or redemptive narrative. And that they play an integral role in the redemption of the cosmos, and so they're participants in sainthood. So that's really what Trent Doherty's theodicy would cover, that without having to tack on ad hoc theoretical content. But
right on.
Well, are we at a wind down point now, gentlemen?
We
I know
are
we've got
at
Dr.
an
Paul
end
Anderson
point.
coming on at 6 p.m. to discuss the reliability of the Gospel of John. David and I actually pre-recorded that interview, and man, I did not know. So I got in touch with Dr. Dan Wallace, and he pointed me in the direction of Dr. Anderson. I never heard of Dr. Anderson before that, and I'm so happy I found him and actually, was able to convince him to come on and do an interview with us. Super cool dude. I love Dr. Anderson, and he is just a fountain of knowledge whenever it comes to the Gospel of John. So we're getting ready to release that here in about 15 minutes. So y'all stick around for that. But David, is there anything else you wanted to tack on that? I know we got our live debate coming up at 7:30.
Yep.
7:30 Eastern. Dr. Jonathan McLatchie and Michael
Granado. Right.
Michael Granado.
Yeah,
that should be good. Yeah.
I haven't heard of. Yeah, I haven't listened to any of those guys before. And
yeah,
so
they're
I'm
good.
excited to have that.
They're both pretty good. They got some good shows out. So
nice. I'll check them out after this. But
all right.
Anyway,
well, everybody,
Travis,
this is it. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you close us out. I'll get the stuff ready for a closing.
I was just going to say, Travis, Caleb, you guys are amazing. I love you all both so much, and I'm looking forward to actually going back and listening to this conversation. I hate that I missed it, and I was doing that live Q&A on TikTok, but I'm glad I got to catch the tail end of the conversation. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. Is there any last words that you guys want to have for our listeners? Travis, we'll start with you.
So just wanted to, thank you guys for the opportunity. I think I would recommend the Theodicy book from Trent Doherty, as well as the Darwinian Problem of Evil by John Schneider, if you really want to look into this further to see, what we're talking about. And you can also see John Chisholm is the one who first coined the term the defeat condition. And so, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, Caleb.
Caleb
took
said,
off.
No, I ain't doing
it.
Yeah.
Caleb has no last words.
Yeah, he's been having issues with lagging all day anyway. So, anyways, guys, again, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you at 7:30. That's the next live. Bye.
God bless.